So my name is Ainsley. I'm the Director of Research with Structure Research. We're a boutique research shop headquartered in Toronto, but we do global coverage, so I cover both Canada and Europe for Structure Research. So very excited to be here to hear from these esteemed panelists. And I guess without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves. Maybe we'll start with you, Vassilis.
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Vassilis Koutsoumpas. I serve as a digital policy and AI advisor to the Prime Minister. Recently moved back from the United States. Really happy to be joining the conversation.
I'm Yanna Andronopoulou. I'm the General Manager of Microsoft for Greece, Cyprus and Malta.
My name is Linardakis. I'm Greek, but I live in Germany, and I'm very happy to be here.
Hi everyone, McCormick. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Echelon Data Centers.
And I'm also Chief Marketing Officer at Start Campus out of Portugal.
Excellent, thank you very much. So as this is a panel about which regions are emerging as prime locations for digital AI campuses, and we happen to be in Greece, maybe we can kick it up with Yanna and say, you know, what is it about Greece that kind of drew Microsoft here in the first place?
So yes, as you say, we have announced that we are building a data center region in Greece, supporting all our services, so Azure, Dynamics and Modern Work. And what we examine overall before deciding investing in one location has to do, number one, with the availability of resources, and that has to do, first of all, with the appropriate land. Data centers take a lot, thousands of square meters for hyperscalers. So actually you really need to identify the proper land, the proper distances between the territories of the land, expandability, and many other factors like, you know, even the number of earthquakes plays a role. So you analyze all that. Then, of course, telco, availability, connectivity, broadband connectivity is very, very important. So you need to foresee your needs and make sure that there is proper infrastructure and proper planning within the country for this. Availability of green energy, very, very important. Right now with AI, we require more and more energy. I guess you'll read what is happening. Some of you are already working with that. So it's very, very important to have the proper capacity in energy generation, proper distribution network, and also expandability for when it's needed. And then if I move out from resources, it's very, very important, the availability of proper business ecosystem. Business case is very, very important. So to have a vibrant, you know, economic ecosystem with companies that will leverage those technologies is very, very important. And this comes together with the regulations and the laws in the specific country. So to have a proper framework where such investments can flourish is very, very important. Also, when you build such an infrastructure, it's not only for one country, it also covers neighboring countries. So it's very, very important that those, let's say, investments are close to countries that can also use those infrastructures. And finally, the availability of talent is very, very important. So to have proper education systems and enough skilled resources is crucial in order to succeed. So all those factors, as well as geopolitical factors, of course. So having a geopolitical stability is crucial. Those are long-term investments. You don't invest just for 3-4 years. So having this long-term visibility and also clarity of the operation. So, you know, a framework of legal and regulatory that allows you to operate according to the principles of that, you know, enhance and secure data privacy and proper operations. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lot of factors that have to come together to sort of make a region attractive for investment. not just in Greece, but other locations. And maybe, I know, Spiro, you are kind of, have a lot of experience building in Germany, and as, the Frankfurt market has got so constrained, what other markets kind of are you looking at in Germany right now?
I first agree fully with Yanna. Exactly, these are the points that we also look when we look for sites. It's not only power, it's not only land and not only power, as maybe we heard a little bit today. All these other factors are extremely important, and one of the most important things we have to underline is the support of the local municipalities, of the government and authorities, and to convince them that a data center is something good for them. Yeah? It's not a big building which is ugly and takes only power. It gives you much more, a better base to develop the whole region. And that's why we look also in other regions outside of Frankfurt or Berlin. Yeah? This is an area which is extremely attractive and which remains attractive. But at the moment, there we have to wait at least 5 years for something new. And that's why we look for areas where exactly these points are okay. And what we see at the moment, at least in Germany, is the region between Cologne and Düsseldorf, where by accident also Microsoft announced something a few years ago, and we see a lot of other players, wholesalers, going into the market looking for sites and things like that. And the reason for that is there is a good infrastructure for data centers. And the second is that we have many old plants, coal mining and things like that, that we can use for data centers here. And if you see where it is exactly in the middle of the distance between Amsterdam and Frankfurt, so 2 flaps, which is extremely good. Another point, another area which is also very attractive in Germany is the north coast. 200 kilometers in the north of Berlin, as an example, where you have plenty of land, where you have plenty of power renewable sources. We have offshore wind parks there. There are a lot of solar parks along the highways that we have. And this is an area for Germany which is a little bit underdeveloped. And politicians are extremely friendly, and they help you in doing what you would like to do in order to create with you a good business case. I mean, looking outside of Germany, I think Spain is a good example, Portugal, and I see also a big potential here in Greece. We have a lot of renewable energies here, and I think we will find the right piece of land to do also good campuses here.
Yeah, and you make a good point about old vacant industrial sites being, good locations for data center development. Usually they'll have a little bit of power that comes with them. It might be easier to get more in. Is it also more easier to get the local support of the government as well as population when you're, redeveloping an old industrial site instead of, coming in and doing a greenfield build on farmland or agricultural areas?
It is a way to go, because as I said before, we have to convince them that data center is a good thing. But if you tell them the story and if you show them the advantages that the data center brings, places to work, you create an infrastructure, maybe you can feed the heating system that they have, maybe, you will win them.
Maybe Omer, do you have something to add to that on, reusing an old industrial site?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a path there to Portugal, and that's exactly what we've done with Start Campus in Portugal. It's an old coal power plant that's been decommissioned, and the reason that was so interestingly, the investors, when looking at the Start Campus locations, looked at 50 locations around Europe and whittled it down one by one, exactly as Yanna said, around location, stability, power, land availability, workforce, and Portugal kept on ticking all the boxes. But a really unique one is our site when fully developed at 1.2 gigawatts, is going to be fully seawater cooled. And to be able to do that, we need to take in per minute about 300,000 square cubic meters of water. And you can imagine the pipes to do that would be millions, 10 millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. So to have a coal power plant there where the pipes, I visited for the first time a few weeks ago, vast, the size of this room, means it's incredibly attractive to repurpose that. And it ties to the point that the community sees that in terms of a coal power plant changing to a data center. And data centers from that perspective are very valuable. But just to the start point of where we sit here, I think it's important to take a step back that traditional markets, I worked in Singapore before and London within the data center sector, they're all getting squeezed now. The last task I had in Singapore, my previous employer was to look at the different segments that the government was giving around power for data centers. And not every provider won that. And we'll see this squeeze continue. So these secondary or third so-called markets, Greece, Portugal, Spain, and Scandinavia sort of elevated itself, I would say, to that, are going to increase. And I would argue this is probably one of the most important panels from that perspective, because AI eventually is going to be ingrained in everything we do. So every country needs to make these decisions. So the ones that move first and enable that infrastructure are going to be almost sort of AI hotbeds in terms of delivering that for other countries and to the world.
And maybe I'll flip it back to talk a little bit more about government incentives for attracting this investment and the kind of, Vassilis, do you have anything to touch on there in terms of what you had to do to go out and attract this type of investment?
Yes, first of all, I don't want to take the credit for the work. I started in this position a few months ago, so a lot of work has been done by the Ministry of Digital Governance, the Ministry of Infrastructure, the Ministry of Development. But what I do want to say is that I think we're witnessing the manifestation of AI in its physical form, whether it is in the form of campuses, whether it is in the form of hyperscale infrastructure, whether it is in the form of compute clusters, and we make the realization, not now, we've made the realization that it's not just about technology, but it's also about energy, it's also about governance, it's also about geography and legitimacy itself. And we had a discussion before about the data center moratorium that Amsterdam put up in 2020, and I think that presents an interesting case study that governments, they should be on top of these issues when it comes to the regulatory and the energy challenges, because if we're not on top of it, it's not only going to hinder progress, but at the end of the day, local communities will reject it, which to a point is even more dangerous because it creates a downward spiral that you can't easily get back from. But I want to put the discussion in a broader context, because I think that data center investments, they don't happen in a day. It's not like Microsoft looks at Greece, it looks at the weather, it looks at the beach, and they're like, yes, we'll invest in Greece just because it makes sense. I think it's a coordinated effort that takes a lot of time and energy, and it has to do with both creating the proper economic climate, but also the public institution and infrastructure to support this. And in the past 5 to 6 years, even since 2019, I think that Greece has been actively trying to do that. And to provide some context around this, we've been seeing on average 17.5 year-over-year adoption of public services for citizens in Greece ever since 2019. The digitization for public services for businesses is above EU average. Today, in comparison to 2019, we're scoring 86 out of 100 in the index. The EU average is around 84, still higher. And then you have a series of application and one-stop shops, one-stop portals like gov.gr, which I'm guessing most of you are familiar with, consolidating over 2,000 services being used by over 2.7 million citizens, and handling more than 890 million queries per year. Now, why is all this important? It's important, I think, for two reasons. First, because it shows the hyperscalers, the big investors, that Greece is ready as a country to handle this tech-led revolution. Its public institutions can keep up, but to a second degree, and I think that speaks to our discussion a bit even more when it comes to communities, it shows to people how technology can actually change their lives and improve their lives. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that I think that when hyperscalers are looking for site locations, they prioritize three things. I mean, that's what we've seen. Of course, many factors are being considered, but the one is speed, clarity, and coordination. And I think what we've tried to do is pass regulation through the Ministry of Development that when certain investments come on board beyond a certain threshold and are characterized as strategic investments, there's a fast-track process to bring those in, issue those land and environmental permits as fast as possible. Some impediments might come along the way, but we can say that we've bypassed them. And at the end of the day, manage to move forward with the investment, itself. And Microsoft is definitely a case. And then going back to the community aspect of it, I think that when it comes to the data center moratorium in Amsterdam a few years ago, it wasn't just an issue, I think, of energy supply, which part of it was. I think it was also an issue of energy fairness as well, because when you have those big hyperscalers coming in and actively competing with local communities as to who's going to get the energy, this creates an unnecessary competition and an unnecessary class that I guarantee to you no government wants to resolve or get in the middle of it. So what we've tried to do at least is be a bit proactive when it comes to those issues, and you'll see that in other investments. You have AWS, who has committed in investing 1 billion in 3 wind farms, which are over 400 megawatts each, and which will actively power not only data centers and their infrastructure, but also local communities, households, local businesses, public institutions. So you're actively, not only attracting an investment, which is obviously a big win for the country, but finding ways to incorporate that in the local community and make it, part of it. Combine the AI infrastructure with the green transition in a way, and you're strengthening the grid instead of competing for the grid. And what we've tried to do as a government, and obviously there are many things to be done on that front, is that we don't just want to be site selectors or attract a hyperscaler for the sake of attracting a hyperscaler, but finding ways to align that with our national development priorities on the one hand, and steward that investment to have the meaningful community impact that we wanted to have.
That makes a lot of sense. Maybe flipping it a little bit, because when you're thinking about investing in all these new locations and the build costs keep going up and the builds get more complex, and it's almost like a little bit risky to be the first one to plant your flag in a new market. I don't know, maybe Simon, I'll kick it off with you here and ask maybe how are developers kind of managing the financial risk amid the uncertain demand projections and evolving AI?
Yeah, look, it's pretty difficult. We're a developer. We're in 3 markets in Europe at the moment: Dublin, London, and Milan, and trying to make sure that we're nimble and that we're lean and that we can meet our customers' demand. That's a challenge as we get towards more increased build costs. The capital requirements obviously go up. The check sizes that we've got to write go up. The equity that we have in a business ends up getting diluted as we look for those checks. So I think it was Olivier said it earlier. You need to be there with a big financial backer. If you're not, then you're really gonna struggle to play here. How do we manage it? We manage it through having good relationships with our customers. That when they need something, that we're able to react to it, or that we can give them what they want in as short a time frame as possible. We also stay pretty tight with our supply chain as well, so that whenever it comes to questions of lead times, whenever it comes down to put in deposits, that we're there, we're ready and willing and able to act. And I think that's really it. We need to be there. We need to be positioned correctly. And I guess it's going to be a case of who can stay nimble, is going to be the most successful.
Anyone else on the panel want to comment on how you balance the financial risk or add to what Simon said? Okay. When we're also thinking about building for AI factories, latency isn't as much of a factor, but you still do need ways to get data in. So maybe I'll kick it off with you, Omer. How important was it to have a site with subsea cable connectivity, and how do you view the importance of connectivity to your campus?
Yeah, it's definitely on that. So on that list. So when I said earlier that there was this, 50 or so location list from the investor group, looking at this huge, investment in campus, total 8.5 to 10 billion euros by the end of it. So it's going to be, once it's completed with all the investments, Portugal's largest investment, largest than the automotive factory that was the largest investment. So on that list, connectivity and network was high up. I would caveat that a little bit by saying it depends what you're building to a degree. So if you're looking to build a retail co-location site or an edge site, obviously you're going to be near a metro center and you're going to want incredibly good connectivity and network. If you're looking at a large AI campus, and this is where I think the market's going to slowly go, there's going to be workload distinctions around builds because it's going to have to be, then you're looking at a little bit different. So when we look at where we are in Portugal, we're not in Lisbon, we're not in the metro area. We're an hour drive down in Sines, or Sinj as it should be pronounced, which is one of the largest gateway and terminals for liquid nitrogen, gas, and automotive transport as well. But that location had enough connectivity from what Portugal is getting. That was key for us. So Portugal actually, which surprised me when I went from Singapore, is actually more connected from a subsea than even Singapore is. It's the only place that gets you to every continent in the world. So that was enough, and then getting that extra bit of latency down to the site is doable. But as I said, that's because the workloads we're looking at primarily are AI training models that don't need that direct, unless you move to AI inference eventually, that needs a bit more. So that's how I set it up for the others to come.
Is it really pronounced Sinj? It's not Sines?
No. I learned that as well.
Yeah. I think, it's the, when we talk about the learning models, you've got a bigger focus on TCO at that point. It's not just the cost of the build, it's not just the cost of the land acquisition, it's how much money you're going to spend on the power. It's going to be your biggest bill. You take the likes of the Nordics, where you've got 35, 40 euros per megawatt hour. Even in Spain, you're 1.5x that. I know what are you doing in Portugal?
We're about 6 cents off Scandinavia, so very close.
Yeah. You go to Ireland, right, and we're up at 110, 120 euros per megawatt hour. That just can't be a suitable market for doing the training of the models. So yeah, that TCO comes into it, and I think the other point that Vassilis made around friction. How easy is it to go into a location? It's not just how supportive the government is, because we've seen governments be supportive, but it's how much they stick to the regulations that they have. If they tell you need to do A and you do A, then you expect the outcome from that. If they tell you to do B and you do B, then you should expect the outcome from that. It's that certainty that the business thrives on. It's not. We saw Macron come out and say it's 112 billion he's going to put into AI. Trump says 500 billion. Okay, next guy says another big number, right? But unless it actually translates into something that we can use on the ground, I think that's actually where we want to go, where we want to look.
And if I can add, it's very, very important to do a proper analysis of the actual workload, so it's not just the building. If you don't know what services you need to launch, you cannot plan correctly. And this has two pillars. One is the pillar of what energy, telcos, and the rest you will need, and what expandability. But the other pillar has to do with the financials and guaranteeing your ROI and reducing your risk. So it's very, very important to start very early, be very targeted and intentional on the industries you are after. For example, if you are after manufacturing, then you need very low latency. So the requirements and the distance are different. So it's very, very important to have this plan with the business ecosystem to know where you are going.
And how important is it also to still be flexible within that? You know,
It's nowadays actually the supply chains have improved much better than before. Also, leveraging AI, you can have very good insights about the predictions for the market. So there is more space for flexibility than 10 years ago where it all started. So still you cannot change your mind within one day, but the times now are in terms of months rather than years that it used to be before.
And the other thing I wanted to touch on, because you guys talked about the differences in power costs between countries, and so if it was just down to that, everyone would go where power is cheaper, but it's not. And we haven't talked about data sovereignty regulations, and I'm curious as to what extent that would influence site selection for hyperscale cloud providers and AI campuses. Can we start with you, Yanna?
Yeah. It's very, very important, especially as we live in the era of AI, and data is the key to all this. Okay, so the local laws and regulations for data sovereignty are very, very important and can have an impact on the level of investment. So for sure in Europe we are better because there is a common approach, so data sovereignty requirements can be covered within the EU territory. This allows for synergies and more a better exploitation financially of the investments. There are countries that have much more strict local laws. There, of course, you need to have much better government incentives to justify for the business case. There are countries that actually, on top of having the right processes for strategic investments, they are offering tax incentives, they even subsidize parts of the investment. So depending on the country, there are different, and there's, how strict their framework on data sovereignty is. They are investing more. It's very, very important also to have the right, in such countries, the right strategic partnerships. Usually in those countries you have some restrictions, so you need maybe to partner with a local player, and this happens a lot outside Europe. It could be a telco, it could be a major, let's say, provider in the country. So it's very important also to have, though, a clarity on this framework, so to have established laws, because at least like this, you know the principles of operation. So it's better to have a well-known framework, legal, for data sovereignty, and know and understand the financial risk you are taking and your ROI, rather than being in a country where it's unstable and you don't know what is required. This is not a, it creates a very risky business case.
Yeah, look, I'd add to that by saying, in Ireland we're pretty familiar with tax incentives for getting the companies in, rightly or wrongly. But what those tech companies in Ireland has allowed is a pretty sophisticated data protection environment, a data regulator as well, and that's for Ireland anyway. It's been a virtuous cycle. As Vassilis said, having that competency in your country is going to generate more people coming into the country. They can see that you're digitized. They can see that you're sophisticated in the area of data sovereignty in respect to data residency. So the next the next frontier, if you like, the next countries that we're going to go to for AI have got to demonstrate that.
And one of when we're talking about resource constraints earlier, power is obviously the number one, but it was brought up on the panel this morning that talent is also a big resource constraint that the industry is facing. So, how are operators kind of balancing the need for proximity to this talent with the challenges of finding that suitable land and power? We'll kick it off with you again, Yanna. Or Vassilis, did you have something?
I can speak from the government's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can speak from an operator's perspective. AI infrastructure is fluid to a point, and that makes sense. In the sense that it's not a natural prerogative that compute and talent will go together. But governments can play a role there in creating those ecosystems that bring compute and talent together, because you have operators who think about it, I think, in a hybrid way, in the sense that we'll create their R&D hubs in big urban centers that have research institutions, universities, and so on, where talent usually resides. And then we'll find places and unveil our infrastructure capacity that combine land, fiber connectivity, and energy, and that makes sense. But then government there has to play a role to kind of try and mix and match both the talent and then compute. And I want to speak a little bit about what the Greek government has been trying to do to not only attract talent from abroad, but also foster talent within Greece itself. And again, taking a step back, it doesn't just have to do with the investment itself. It's not like Microsoft will announce a big data center investment and then talent will come pouring in. It's a series of public policies we've been trying to enact ever since 2019, and I just want to mention one or two specifically, and how those have been panning out lately. Now, one, we have a huge talent pool in the Greek diaspora, and it's not just Greeks who have lived abroad for many years. It's expats. It's people who moved abroad for a better life, and we've been trying to find ways to bring those people back. And I want to mention three specific policies. One would be tax incentives. For those of you that might not know, if you're an expat and you come back to Greece, there's a good chance you might be able to write off 50% of your personal income tax for the next 7 years and avoid double taxation treaties. So that was an incentive we've tried to offer to bring people back. Obviously, not enough. And another way we've seen that can attract both Greek talent but also foreign talent are research institutions. You bring research institutions in, you bring your big universities in, talent comes, companies come because they follow that talent. Obviously, that doesn't happen in a day, that doesn't happen in a year, but governments are often accused of not thinking long term, so we're trying to do that in certain areas. And case in point would be a new education law we passed last year, which, again, for those of you that are out of Greece and didn't know that, the non-state universities could not exist in Greece beforehand. It wasn't a thing. So let's say you have a Yale or Harvard or an Imperial wanting to create a department here in Greece, that would not be possible under the previous legal regime. Now it is. And why is that important? Because, again, those research institutions coming in, they attract talent, and that talent can, at the end of the day, with other infrastructure, obviously, attract more investments. And the third policy I want to mention is, apart from those tax incentives, apart from bringing research institutions in, and I'm mentioning that last because if I mention it first, it would be a bit meaningless, but purpose attracts talent as well. Obviously, it's not enough. Salaries attract talent, tax incentives attract talent, but purpose attracts talent as well. And what we're trying to do is not just attract talent for the private sector, to be honest here, and I don't think we've been openly speaking about that a lot, but we're also trying to attract talent in government. We need talented people, we need web developers, we need data scientists, we need engineers, we need policy makers who think about things differently to effectively come into government, because if they don't, we won't have people to be able to communicate with people like you from this panel. And we've tried to create using AI and using these technologies, projects that speak to a specific purpose. A case in point I want to mention, just for everyone who didn't know, It ran last year as a pilot project. We have actively deployed sensors that speak between themselves using AI technology in different areas across Greece, and they monitor fires in their early stage, and they send notifications directly to the fire brigade, being able to pinpoint these fires. And you haven't heard of them, so that's a good thing. And in the summer of 2024, it effectively shut down more than 100 fires before they became uncontrollable. And this speaks to projects with a purpose. And another thing we've been trying to do, and I don't want to take advantage of the time, is we're thinking that AI can be a force of disruption within government. And I won't fully elaborate on this because we're slowly starting to think how to develop it and how to work around it, but we do believe that government can itself build applications and build services in-house. Create hubs within the government, within the Ministry of Digital Governance, within the presidency that I reside, and be able to produce applications that are not only used by citizens, which is a thing that we focused intensely over the past 5 or 6 years, but also used internally within government to streamline processes and make work more efficient. So what we're trying to do now is create this kind of hub, and we will be making an open call to talent both in Greece and abroad, engineers, developers, to be part of this team and create those applications, purpose-driven applications.
Do you want to speak from the cloud side?
Yes. First of all, just to state that we as Microsoft, we don't believe AI will replace humans. However, humans with AI will replace humans without AI. So, talent is very, very important. I mentioned before, it's something we examine before investing within a country. And there is a talent war already between countries, between private and public sectors, and even between enterprises, because the needs are very big, both in the space of AI, but also in cybersecurity. So what we do and what we announced together with the investment in the data center region was a very big skilling program to upskill 100,000 Greeks. Up to now we have upskilled already 70,000 with digital skills, and we also invest heavily on the development of AI skills, both on the, let's say, a business ecosystem of the private sector. So we do a lot of upskilling programs in customers and partners. We collaborate a lot with the government. We have launched here in Greece a public servants academy. This is one of the best practices in the EU actually. It's based on a train-the-trainer approach, and a lot of public servants have been trained and continue to be trained on different levels. Some are just users, let's say, of those technologies. Others are more advanced as power users in order to be capable of even developing some type of applications for the government. And we are also very intentional on leaving no one behind. It's very, very crucial because right now the technology moves at such a fast pace that it's very important to really include all the different segments of the population of a country. That's why also we run some broad population AI skills. Last year we upskilled 1,000 persons. We had 9,000 applications for this program actually. So it seems that the Greek ecosystem has understood the importance of embracing AI fast. Right now I'm very happy because we run an AI skills for women, and Greece is the second right now in the whole EMEA in terms of adoption of the plan. So this is also showing that there is a collective effort to create a regional AI hub. I fully agree with what you mentioned before. It's very important to the countries that will have AI data centers within the country will become regional hubs, influencing their business ecosystem, but also the neighboring countries. So that's very important. And of course, we are also focusing on the hyper-local community. I fully agree that it's important to promote those investments to the community. So we work on upskilling the community. We have run a very big program with schools, actually, using Minecraft within schools, allowing to the 7,000 pupils in the area of our data center to redesign their city in a more sustainable way, learning also how to code. We are also running there in the community Skills for Jobs program. So actually we are upskilling a lot of unemployed people to be able to work in the data center or in the broader ICT ecosystem of the country. So this is also very, very important, as those communities usually are not within the city center, so they lack of opportunities.
Thanks. Just in the interest of time, I think we'll have to leave it there. I can't believe we've run out of time already, but we do have 30 seconds left, so if there's someone in the audience who wants to ask a quick question, please feel free, raise a hand.
You've now got 19 seconds.
One quick question. Everyone talks about power, but what about water?
Yes. Does anyone want to jump in first?
I can say
Seawater,
that-
but where that's possible, clearly. So obviously you can't do that everywhere, but we're using seawater and putting seawater back into the sea. So our water usage is going to be zero. Now clearly there's certain locations in the world where you can do that, but it's an interesting transition from energy to data centers now around that whole sector. So if you go to most events, but global data center events, it's energy investors now doing the rounds. So there's a lot of energy and old coal plants sitting by sea water. So that's one route. And then I'll let the others speak about what they're doing around water.
Very quickly, it's very important also to use recycled water, so not the water that we drink. Also to leverage AI for the operations in order, let's say, to identify potential better water use within the data center. The challenge is that the AI requires a lot of energy. This is high temperature, a lot of cooling. We need the water for cooling. There is a lot of research being done right now. We are doing research on the chip level, so to leverage microfluidics to, let's say, have the chip, let's say, cool itself. So a lot of studies, and also we use already AI to predict for weather forecast and adapt, the level of water used for the operations of the data center. So a lot of research around this, very valid point.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. Maybe a round of applause for everyone.